Hello, and welcome to another episode of F Stopping by the Woods, a nature photography podcast. In this episode, I speak to my dear friend and brilliant nature photographer, Sumeet Gayathri Moghe. Sumeet and I spent close to a month in Botswana in the dry season of 2024. It was one of the best wildlife trips I've ever done. We drove through beautiful pans, we camped in open camps, which we also shared with hippos and elephants, and we came back with tons of images and a dozen stories. I've been posting them on this channel, and this is the last of that series, where we reflect on our epic adventure and talk about the hits and misses, with a huge bias towards the hits. Hey everyone, hope you're all well. If you've been following my channel, you know that Sumeet and I, along with Gayatri and Anil, we'd spent close to a month in Botswana, and I've been uploading videos from that trip on my channel. And we thought it's a good idea to do a sort of a reflections and a roundup of that trip to sort of talk about some of the learnings we had, some of the things we might have done differently, our favorite moments of the trip, and so on and so forth. And we're doing this recording on February the 1st. And I think about half my Botswana videos are up on the channel at this moment. And there is a good 6 or 7 videos which are going to sort of be posted, after which we actually see this video. So this video is going to be posted much later than when we're recording it, but I think it's a good idea to record it now anyway, because it's been about 3 months since we returned from Botswana and we don't want our memories to sort of fade. So while our memories are still as fresh as they are, we think it's a good idea to record some of our favorite moments of the trip, our reflections, and sort of have something in place which helps anyone and ourselves plan better the next time we're going there. Does that sound about right, Sumeet? Anything you want to add to that?
No, that's a perfect summary of why we are doing this video.
Awesome. So let's start with some of the top moments of the trip and maybe talk about 3 or 4 top moments. So Sumeet, what would your absolute top moment of the trip be?
Yeah, I think I'll frame it as experiences. So if I had to say what my top few experiences would be, I'd never done a helicopter photography flight before. So just because of the uniqueness, that was number one. I've never spent time with a meerkat colony in golden light before. So in terms of experiences, that's another. Seeing a lion kill in the middle of a desert, pans actually, but still desert habitat, that was super special. So I think that scores as well. You folks found the aardwolf on the last day at Naipan, our last drive actually. So I'd never seen an aardwolf. No, actually, I've seen an aardwolf before once, and maybe in very fading light in Masai Mara, just running by a car. But that was the sighting that we got was really prolonged sighting. It wasn't a full body sighting, at least because we reached after you. So that was big. And if I had to add one more to it, it'll be the fact that we spent almost 2.5 days with leopards. So those were like, I've never had such a prolonged leopard sighting. So yeah, those are my top few.
Yeah, much the same for me. And I'll not talk about some of the overlaps except one, which is the helicopter ride. I mean, the Okavango is sort of the big draw for me, so to say, about Botswana. I mean,
yeah.
The Okavango Delta is the main reason why I went to Botswana, and seeing the Delta from the helicopter was a fantastic experience. Like for the first 20 or so minutes, I couldn't shoot much because like every scape was so unique and so beautiful, right? So, yeah. And just seeing the vastness and the scale, and even within the Delta itself, the diversity of habitats within, like you'd still find a small dry area in the middle of the Delta. You'd find sort of green wetlands in the Delta, right? So, and you'd find really, really tall palm trees as well. So just the diversity of habitat within the Delta, the number of different species of wildlife in that Delta was beautiful. And just to see it from top during golden light, that was a top moment for me. Second one also might have been the aardwolf, which is something we did not expect at all. If you remember, we were going up and down that road looking for bat-eared foxes, and we stopped at a bat-eared fox, and we wondered, why is this bat-eared fox alone and without a partner? And then we wondered, hey, this bat-eared fox has a face that looks a little bit like a hyena. So what's going on there? And then we actually saw it with our lenses, and it's not a bat-eared fox. It's probably a hyena, and took us some time to realize that it's an aardwolf, right? And the absolute icing on the cake there was that when we looked at Anil's photos, there was a pup in the den. So it was actually a denning mother, and she was outside for a fair while for us. We've actually seen sort of got the full body shot, so that's an absolute highlight for me as well. There's a certain amount of joy to finding something by yourself, tracking something by yourself, discovering, and especially when it's as unexpected as an aardwolf.
Yeah.
That was really, really amazing moment for me. I think one thing which you didn't speak about, which was brilliant for me, was in one of the evenings in Naipan. I think on the evening in which the kill happened itself, there was a really, really large herd of cave buffalo which came to the waterhole in the evening, maybe close to 6:30 or so, right? And the light was really good. We could not photograph much because of how dark it was, but the light had almost had this really, really silhouette-y dark orange hue, and there was interaction between the buffaloes and the elephants. The buffaloes went towards the carcass and chased the lioness away. And all of that was like, watching some of these things that you've seen in a Nat Geo documentary unfold live in front of you. And that for me was a very, very, that for me was a brilliant moment from the trip as well. So that is probably my top three. That's probably my top three. And there's many more. But if I had to pick up three, those three would probably be it. And another one which comes quite close to it is driving in Khwai, because Khwai is the first place where, this is the first trip where we've sort of driven by ourselves. But Khwai is the first place where we had to cross a river and go to the other side of the Embudu channel, right? And that is something we've only seen our guides at Mara and other places do. And we've always known of it to be a slightly sort of risky affair, but to manage it a few times ourselves, even though once we lost our number plate while doing it, that also was an experience for me every time we sort of did that. So yeah, those were some of the 4 or 5 things that stood out for me.
Yeah, I think a couple of things there is that some of the moments that were awesome may not have translated into photographs. So for example, it was an awesome moment every time the buffalo herds would come into the waterhole, right? Because they would just overtake the waterhole and be dust and chaos everywhere, right? But the thing with buffaloes are they just become these black clumps. So isolating an image is very hard. Now, is it a fantastic experience? Of course it is. But does it translate always into great photographs? No, and it's hard. It's really hard work to find a photograph. And the other thing that what you were saying, and also just exchanging our favorite moments tells me, is that some of these experiences are so novel, right? For example, I'd never done that helicopter ride before. So there's a spell of time that you're kind of just almost stopping your jaw from hitting the floor of the helicopter in that case. Now, you don't shoot much because you're just trying to wrap your head around the experience. And it's a chunk of change, man. It's expensive. Yeah. Could I have done another one? Yeah, it would have been super expensive to do another one. Yeah, if I could have afforded it, maybe my second helicopter ride would have been more productive when it comes to photos, right?
Yeah, for sure. We came very close to doing it. We seriously considered the logistics of doing it, but because of, both of us needing to spend some time at Bushlore, that was sort of that decision made itself and we couldn't go. But yeah, for sure, the next time we do a helicopter ride, we know it'll definitely be more productive photographically, but we don't know if it'll be like the sort of the same experience. And any moments that weren't we enjoyed the trip a lot, so it's hard to phrase this, but any moments that you did not like, for example, anything that was not a great moment?
Hard to tell. No, I don't think so. I pretty much enjoyed every moment of it. Maybe this is where some of our experiences might differ, despite the fact that we went on the same trip, right? And this is also advice for everyone. For example, we had this road from hell between Khwai and Kasani, which went through Savuti.
Yeah.
And despite how bad it was, I enjoyed every minute of it. It's a badge of honor I will wear for the rest of my life. And so, yeah, I loved it. But
yeah, I think
not everyone will.
We also had a slight misadventure. And I think driving in some of those roads is not something I particularly enjoyed. Probably because, on the way from Kubu to Gweta, our car met with a sort of a minor accident. And I don't think there's a way in which I've avoided because I was completely blindsided by a bark coming out of the undergrowth, right? So, and now that I think about it, Kubu to Gweta was one of the easier sort of roads that we had to drive on. From there on, the roads only got more and more difficult. From there, we had driving to Naipan, which was harder. After that, we drove from Mount to Khwai, which was also a difficult road. And then Khwai to Savuti was probably the hardest drive sort of we've done. And a few times on that drive, I thought about how badly we're going to be stuck and how we're going to cope with that. If you remember, when we were done with the drive, everything at the back of the car was in all sorts of directions. Like our fridge was open and everything gets sort of splashed out of the fridge, and all of those not so pleasant sights and smells we had to deal with. But yeah, I think that's one of the things which yeah, you sort of reveled in it. I didn't like it so much. Another minor misadventure I had was sort of losing my mics. I lost one mic in the helicopter ride, and I lost another mic somewhere. I think it is in the Khwai or the Mbudi River. So I wish I sort of need to figure out a better way. I thought a magnetic mic is going to be very, very sort of safe and secure. Clearly not the case, especially when we're driving on sort of roads that are up and down. So maybe I need to think about a better way to keep that safe. Yeah. So moving on, right? And you rightly mentioned that the best moments may not necessarily be the best photos. What were your top 3 or 4 best photos from the trip?
So I'm sure I made some fantastic golden light photos with the meerkats. But if I even look at Kubu Island, right? I think one night we stood in front of the really iconic baobab trees, and there's that cluster which is really signature Kubu Island, and we made some photographs with the Milky Way. If you pixel peep, it's probably not the cleanest image, but of course the conditions that you're handed, and we did that at the end of a really tough day. So I think that was very rewarding as a photographic experience, in my opinion. I'm quite happy actually with the fact that, when the lion hunt was on, I probably was able to summon the right presence of mind to figure out where to focus and what to press. Some of it is luck, some of it is muscle memory, so that will probably count right up there. And I think one photograph that still stands out, probably because of primacy bias, it was amongst the first photographs I made on the trip, is we were looking down at the delta, and there were these 2 elephants taking one of their historical pathways through the delta. And somehow that screamed very Africa to me. And it almost felt like, okay, now we have arrived. And I don't know that these are photographically excellent or anything. It just is that I have those memories associated with those photographs, which somehow tick the box for me. And there are also photographs that I haven't processed yet, so maybe I'll find more.
Yeah, there are a lot of photos I haven't processed either, but it's a great point that you make about your personal favorite photo not necessarily being, so to say, the most widely appreciated either on social media or widely appreciated by a large number of people. If you had to do like a presentation with 50 photos from Botswana from this trip, your personal favorite may not be the most popular photo in that. Sort of the case with me as well. One of my sort of favorite photos is of the lioness with the kill. This is aesthetically a very poor photo because you've got heat haze in the background. But somewhere in the heat haze also is a vulture, right? I think it's a lapid-faced vulture. And next to the lioness, you've got a jackal, and also a little bit blurred because of the heat haze. But for me, the heat haze and the lioness and the wildebeest in that photo sort of it's such a telling moment, because we spent the entire afternoon at that one spot waiting for her to drag the kill away, and sort of that never happened, right? So for me, in that sense, that's one of my favorite photos from the trip.
That particular moment, I think at this point, both of us are processing images either for my blog or for your video.
Yeah.
So I'm being very particular to process them in color. And in these images, color is actually a distracting element because it just heightens that heat haze and everything. And I was looking at that exact same moment, and it looks so much better in black and white.
100%. That's one of those images which I may print, not because it's like I said, an aesthetically pleasing moment, but it's just takes you back to that one point in time where you've got a very, very sort of intense, vivid memory about having spent an entire day with a lion who's made a kill, right? So yeah, for me, that's one of those photos. And I think there's a few common ones. Meerkats and golden light. I really like 2 or 3. I think I got the alpha male digging in golden light, and I've got some very good shots of that. I think the leopard in the tree, probably my personal favorite leopard moments were from Khwai, and I think I've made some very good shots of the leopard from the tree. Again, I've processed them in color right now, but I have a feeling that some of these are going to be really, really good in sort of black and white, if I'm able to sort of clear out some of the disturbing branches and so on and so forth in the background. And again, from Naipan, I think I've got a few images of elephants in the golden light, elephants interacting with buffalo, elephants sort of, kicking dust and so on and so forth, which which are also very good images for me. And these are some of my personal favorite images. But it's interesting to note that there's very little overlap between favorite photos versus favorite moments. It's almost like two different lists there. So yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple of others that just come to mind as you were talking about this. So there was this moment when one of the lionesses went and climbed the tree after the leopard, right?
Yeah.
And I've got to think whether I've got a good photo of that because it happened so quickly. I must have some photos for sure. Whether it's an aesthetically pleasing photo, I don't know. And then, actually, in Naipan, one of the days when we were just exploring the pans, not necessarily the waterfall, we came across these really cute bat-eared foxes that were a little more accommodating than the other skittish pairs. And these bat-eared foxes, they pair for life, right? And we had this very tender moment where they were grooming each other, almost licking each other, the kind of canine love that you are used to seeing. And I have a few photographs of that canine affection, which again I have to process and I have to figure out which one I actually like. But I think that was one highlight. So I'll probably know once I've processed it properly.
It sort of goes back to, I think, our favorite author's point on experiencing selves and remembering selves, right? I remember on the afternoon when we were spending time with the bat-eared foxes in Naipan, there was nothing else for us, The lions weren't around, elephants weren't around. So at that moment, that felt like this is an amazing sort of experience. But then when you come back and you remember the trip, you're only remembering the highs or the lows, like, oh, the lion made the kill, or the lions chased the leopard away, or, the buffalo herds and so on and so forth. So what actually was a fantastic experience kind of, gets pushed to the background. But at the moment when we were there, even I remember very clearly, I remember spending a lot of times looking for the bat-eared foxes as well, but somehow they've not come in our discussion till now. Sort of goes back to the point that was made about that, which is also the reason why we're talking about this now, right? So that we don't forget some of these really precious moments, even though this video may only get published 2 months from now or so. So yes, the bat-eared foxes were also on top of my moments list. I don't know if I got a great photo of it, but definitely on top of my moments list. So if you had to do this differently, would there be 2 or 3 things that you might have not done, or 2 or 3 things that you might have done completely differently on this trip in retrospect?
It's a little hard to say, and I know I was planning say something in response to this question because you told me that we want to discuss this topic. But you see, when we Indians travel, right, there is one thing that we have to lock in right at the start, which is our start and end date.
Yes.
So you book flights. Now, once you've got your flights booked, then your trip becomes pretty set in stone. Now, somewhere in the middle of our planning, after we'd blocked our tickets, we realized that we could probably do this overnight meerkat excursion.
Right.
Was it a good idea that we did it? Yes, of course. But it took one night away from Kubu Island, which made Kubu Island very hectic for us. And now if I have to in retrospect plan Kubu Island, then I would say to myself that that place needs a lot more time because there's a composition in every direction you look during the daytime. And those same compositions are wonderful at the night time as well, right? So you can't be working for 20 hours in a day and function on 4 hours of sleep. You will just get burnt out. Yeah. And we did feel burnt out at the end of Kubu Island. So if there was one thing I could change, and if my tickets were flexible, then that would be one thing I would change. The other thing which we consciously chose not to do, and in hindsight may have been a miss, was that we didn't do Chobe National Park in Sabuti. Yeah. We did Chobe National Park from the river, but we didn't do the inland version of Chobe National Park in Sabuti. And this particular year when we visited was an extreme drought.
Yeah.
And if you've seen, elephants were dropping dead. They were falling dead everywhere. And lots of people saw lions eating elephants. So, of course, tragic sight, but also a special sight for anyone who enjoys observing natural history, right? So in hindsight, yes, I would have loved to tack on Sabuti and Chobe National Park. But again, these are trade-offs we make, right? For how long our trip can be, etc., right? So I think that was the little bit that I can say in retrospect. Yeah, probably that.
What aggravated our experience at Kubu, I mean, as beautiful as it was and as much as we enjoyed it, also is the fact that we got lost on our way going there. So as opposed to reaching Kubu at say 3 p.m. in the afternoon, or maybe 1 p.m. in the afternoon, we reached only at 6 p.m. So we lost one session where we could have scouted for as well as shot some baobabs in golden light, and therefore we had to pack in a lot more scouting and a lot more shooting in the limited amount of time we had. The fact that we already had cut a night shot because we had to go photograph the meerkats the day after, so we came close to burning ourselves out at Kubu. We sort of got through maybe a 48-hour period with cumulatively between the 2 days 6 to 7 hours of sleep, which is not great given that you're driving and so on and so forth, right? So that's definitely one thing I would think about. I definitely want to spend more time at a place, and we both know that there is no harm in spending more time at a place. Photographically speaking, photos only sort of get better and better. The other thing which I am sort of thinking about is more from a photography and a gear perspective. I remember struggling a lot in terms of transferring photos, transferring videos to my sort of laptop. And for whatever reason, my laptop took a really, really long time to transfer them, even though we're using the fastest SSD card. So what I want to think about is a better way or some kind of a system where I can hook my laptop up overnight and sort of leave it for transfer, or think about a better system in place where I'm doing smaller bits of transfer if 512 and 1 TB is taking too much time, and figure out a way for myself on how I can do that better. I don't have the answers exactly, but that is definitely something I need to do better. The third thing I'd like to explore, and sort of related to this, is the tent we carried, comfortable as it was and easy as it was to pack and go, in a place like Naipan or say Khwai, where we're spending 5 days, 6 nights, or in excess of 4 days. I thought I might have been a little more comfortable had we got a slightly larger tent that we could just sort of, set up, dump your things in it, lock it well, and leave. I understand the risks of animals sort of coming in and so on and so forth. But I believe if we packed it well, it could also solve some part of the laptop problem where I could leave the laptop there, let the transfer happen, come back, or sort of not worry about a few things. I think that's something we could explore as well. Though there was absolutely nothing wrong in the tent we had in terms of comfort. It was super comfortable. It was super easy to mount and dismount. And the downside of setting a tent up is that you're probably giving up one session on the day you enter the park and one session on the day you exit the park in an effort to set it up and pack it up. So that's something which I'd like to sort of think about. And one more thing which in terms of what I might do better is every time we are locking the car up, I'd make sure that no bugs are entering the car, because as you realized in Naipan, there was this one night where every 15 minutes our car started blaring an alarm out because there was like a moth inside it, and we couldn't figure out for the longest time what was going on with it till we had to sort of get down, open the doors, let the moth out, and then sort of So that's another interesting sort of learning that we had. So when you sort of lock the car, especially in a quiet jungle, that sound can carry like a long distance. It can be very, very disturbing at night for everyone camping there. So don't let moths or any other insects in while locking your car up.
Yeah. About the tent, just for the viewers, remember the trade-off. The trade-off is that if you carry a biggish tent, then you obviously have to carry bedding, pillows, everything else that goes with it. If you carry a smallish tent as well, you can't escape the fact that you will need a mattress to go with it and everything else. So either you'll have to pick it up in country or you will have to ship it from your own country. So there is that additional disadvantage. And I still will prefer the overhead tent for the simple reason that it just affords you safety. There's no leopard getting into your tent or hyena trying to pull at your leg and all of that. Even this year, we're going to Kalahari, right? And there, many of the campsites are, at least on the Botswana side, are unfenced. So I just don't feel comfortable being on the ground with lions walking around and things like that, right? So get my good sleep perched up, and so that's the trade-off for our viewers to know of.
I remember this one night in Khwai where we heard a lion roar so loudly that he was definitely in camp. He was definitely inside our camp somewhere, and he's probably walking towards the river. I remember sort of peeping out of the tent and looking at where he might be. Couldn't find him. We saw him the next day though. Not sure if it's the same lion that roared, but one of the other tourists told us that he thinks it's the same one. So that was quite interesting. There is a safety perspective to it as well. In Naipan, our camp was sort of overrun by jackals. There were elephants walking in and out of camp. In Naipan, I remember waking up a few times and hearing elephants sort of breaking trees next to camp. And this is not next to camp as in some distance away. This is literally next to our car. So yeah, there is a safety angle that we need to consider for sure. So tell me a bit about your next trip to Kalahari and Botswana and South Africa. What's that about? Which destinations? When are you planning to go?
Yeah, so we are going to spend about 3 weeks in the Kalahari, mostly in the South African Kalahari. So it's going to feel like a luxury trip in comparison to our Botswana trip. We'll spend almost an equal amount of time on the two riverbeds for viewers who haven't researched the Kalahari. Two riverbeds, the Nossob, which runs along the east, and Aub, which runs along the west. And in both of those riverbeds attract a lot of wildlife. They're all fossilized riverbeds, so it's not as if there's water flowing in any of those riverbeds except maybe peak of the wet season when there's some rain. Yeah, and we will also spend some time on the Botswana side, which just gives us the experience of those A-frame campsites and being in an unfenced place. But that apart, the Sandparks campsites are going to be, as I said, luxuries in comparison to everything that we experienced in Botswana. Great water, you have electricity, you have charging facilities and whatnot.
Yeah, that's pretty much it that we want to speak about. We have one video on how to go about planning a wildlife trip overall. We have another one which we put out before going to Botswana, which spoke of what planning to Botswana entails, why we are renting our own cars, why we are driving, and so on and so forth. And now we have this, which sort of rounds up Botswana. Having all this in place, are there sort of maybe 3 or 4 things that you'd like to let anyone know if they were planning their trip to Botswana, or if they were planning a self-drive trip to Southern Africa from what we've seen at Botswana, all your learning so far, etc.?
Yeah, for sure. So one big learning, because I've done self-driving before, but there was one big learning I took away from this trip, is that driving around a community concession like Khwai is very different from driving around a national park. And the reason why these two experiences are very different is that in national parks, you can only drive on designated tracks. And as a result, those tracks are very, very well documented. So finding your way along those tracks and finding game along those tracks is a fairly predictable experience. But in places like Khwai, which is a community concession, because there are the official tracks and then there are the back roads and side tracks which you can access. So that becomes a slightly different experience. Now, what I would recommend to anyone who can afford it is maybe the next time I will go to Khwai, and even if they are going to Khwai, probably do the first day or the first 2 days as guided experiences so that you get a sense of the place and where the action is. Because you generally want to build a recent history of action in that area, right? So if you are doing a guided experience, then you build that recent history of action and you're able to identify all the back roads. And from season to season, back roads change. So it's not as if our knowledge from this season will hold in the next season. And then you can do 5-6 days self-driving, which probably works really well. So that's one big learning. The other learning, and really I would say this is just the mindset that you go with, which is mental prep, to say Murphy's Law is in place. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So prepare yourself for things going wrong. If you were preparing yourself for a trip where nothing goes wrong, get on a stagecoach, see Paris, and you'll be fine. But this is Botswana. Africa is harsh as it gets. So things will go wrong. Take it in your stride. And I will also say that some parts of it, right? Like I still look back at getting lost on the way to Kubu Island very fondly. Things that are hard to bear are sweet to remember. So I look at it more like an experience to savor than an ordeal to endure. I would also say that if you are able to, and if you're at least somewhere from Southern Africa and you're going to Botswana, and in that case, why are you even listening to this video? One thing that will help you, and particularly in that problem that you were mentioning, Rufi, which is about charging and transfers and things like that. If you're able to get a good inverter solution, that can take away a lot of stress, especially if you're doing video or you're doing high resolution photography with some of these new cameras, right? So that'll take a lot of stress away. There are a lot of those solutions, but because we are not locals, for us to get that imported, it's difficult, right? And then the last thing I would say, again, it helps for people who are probably coming from Southern Africa into Botswana, is that getting a walkie-talkie rental, a long-range walkie-talkie rental from South Africa is a lot easier than getting a long-range walkie-talkie rental in Botswana. Yes. So if you're doing that kind of a route where you're crossing countries, see if you're able to get yourself one of those walkie-talkies, because if you're in two vehicles like we were, being able to communicate with each other over long distances is really helpful. And of course, there is no phone range, so this is your only backup. I would say those are the things I would probably try to find solutions for if I was to do another trip, and maybe that's just something for somebody to think about if they are planning their trip.
Yeah, strong +1 on the walkie-talkie. I think the walkie-talkie that we rented did not work very well for the first part of the trip. Then we had to get back to, I think, Riley's garage, buy a new one, and that worked well, but it was pretty much like a line of sight thing. So if there's anything that allows you longer range, definitely consider getting that, because you will need it, right? I mean, I remember us getting a few sightings like the lions on the way back from Khwai to camp. I remember that sighting was possible because we had the walkie-talkie. We'd have really liked to have the walkie-talkie when we saw the sable, and we'd have liked to call you, but we were there with this herd of sable. Would have really been nice to have a longer range one then. One more thing I'd like to add, given how many times we got lost, and we used Google Maps from time to time. We used Tracks for Africa from time to time, and we used maps.me from time to time. Of the three, we found maps.me to be fairly accurate in terms of paths within parks, in terms of how to get from point A to point B, etc. And that is, I think, a fairly underrated, less known service that is out there, along with on Google, along with Tracks for Africa, etc. But for us, Maps.me was a savior many a time. So that's one thing I'd like to add to everything else that Sumeet had said.
Yeah, for sure. One thing to note with Maps.me, don't worry if you can't see a track.
Yeah.
Because the track may not show on the map, but if you're going in the same general direction, I think you're fine.
Yeah, it's not the best map interface there is, but it's probably the best map which is updated that there is. So
yeah, exactly.
So that's something I'd like to put out there. So thank you for your time on this. Looking forward to your blogs getting updated. I don't know if you've posted any on Naipan. I think that's pending, and then everything else coming up. And I'm currently working on the Naipan trip video in terms of a day-by-day itinerary, the camp facilities, and so on and so forth. Hopefully that will be posted in a week, and then I'll try to speed up my editing and processing and see how soon I can have all of this and this for now. And thanks for your time. Nice chatting with you as always.